Chapter 51. You are listening at Novel Full. Audio. Ning Qing, why did you lie? Translator. 549690339. Ning Qing took the elevator all the way to the 7th floor. The 7th floor was packed with people today. Based on her memory, she found the consultation room where the examination was done yesterday, only to find that the person sitting inside was not Dr. Liu. She was puzzled. She checked the rooms one by one, but she did not find Dr. Liu. A nurse passed by and Ning Qing stopped her. "Hello, I would like to ask if Dr. Liu is not in the hospital today." The nurse looked at her and felt that she looked familiar, but she couldn't remember who she was. "Dr. Liu is on leave today," she said. "Are you her patient? If you want to see her, you can come back tomorrow when you have an appointment." Ning Qing forced a smile. "Thank you." "You're welcome." Ning Qing frowned and walked back. That's right. She was starting to suspect the car accident. Whether it was her parents, Nian Lai, or what Bai Qingqing had said to her, all of them made Ning Qing feel that things weren't as simple as they seemed. Could Ing Luo's car accident really not have been an accident? And the reason why Nian Lai was so concerned about her health and even married her wasn't just because she looked like Ning Su. It could also be because Hanin's car accident was related to him. Ning Qing was puzzled by all this. Just as he was feeling confused, his phone vibrated. When she saw it, her face turned pale. She quickly walked to the garden and picked up the phone. "Where are you?" The man's voice was low as usual. "I'm at home," Ning Qing said with fake smile. Nian Lai fell silent. Ning Qing felt that he seemed to know something. She looked around guiltily, but didn't see anyone suspicious, then said, "Are you coming back for dinner tonight? I'll buy some groceries and go back to make Yingying." "Didn't you say you were at home?" Nian Lai asked indifferently as he looked at the hesitant figure by the flower bed at the entrance of the hospital. His words were shocking. Ning Qing's palms were sweating. "I'm Ing Luo. Why did you lie?" His calm questioning made Ning Qing's heart beat out of rhythm. She forced a smile with great effort to hide her panic. Wan, was bored at home, so I came out for a walk. I was afraid you would be unhappy, so I didn't tell you. He stopped talking again. Ning Qing held her breath, her heart twisted. Under the bright and sunny weather, her hands were so cold that they were trembling. "Go back early." Ning Qing heaved a sigh of relief when she heard this. "All right," he said. After hanging up the phone, Ning Qing closed her eyes and kept taking deep breaths. A sound came from her phone. She looked at it and was overjoyed. It was a text from Dr. Liu, who asked to meet her to discuss something in detail. After a long time, Ning Qing finally smiled. She jogged to the side of the road, waved for a taxi, and headed to the address on the text message. Under the tree, in the gray luxury car, Nian she lit a cigarette and slowly smoked. "Young master, everything has been arranged," Lu Zhui reported. "Yes," Nian Yu said coldly after he had finished smoking the cigarette in his hand. His dark eyes looked out of the window, his long fingers pinching the cigarette butt. It broke and was thrown out of the window. "Go back," he ordered. "Yes." The car merged into the traffic, and it was in the opposite direction of where Ning Qing was going. Ning Qing alighted in front of a small coffee shop and hurried in. As soon as he entered, he saw a woman sitting by the window with a child. Dr. Liu saw her and stood up, smiling and waving. Ning Qing adjusted her breathing and walked forward. "What would you like to drink?" Dr. Liu asked with a smile. Ning Qing glanced at the little girl and said, "Coffee will do." She was stopped by Dr. Liu. Chapter 52. You are listening at Novel Full. Audio. Do you think Mr. Nian is involved in the car accident? Translator. 549690339. You forgot what I told you yesterday. Girls should take care of their health. After ordering her a glass of warm milk, Dr. Lu held the child who was struggling. Ning Qing asked, "Is that your daughter?" The woman was all smiles. "Yeah." "How old are you?" 3 years old. "So cute," Ning Qing praised as she looked at the pretty little girl. Dr. Lu's face was filled with happiness. "What's cute about it? It's more mischievous." Even though she said that, her smile was always on her face. "Call me big sister," she said to the little girl. The girl raised her chubby little face and smiled, revealing her little canine teeth. "Sister," Ning Qing was touched by her and smiled. "Hello. You're here for business today, aren't you?" Dr. Lu looked at Ning Qing as he carried the child. "I do want to ask you something," Ning Qing said frankly. "You want to ask about the past, right?" "Yes." Ning Qing pursed her red lips and stared at the woman in front of her. "These things are very important to me. I hope you don't hide them from me." "Of course," Dr. Lu said. "That's good. I'll be direct," Ning Qing said. "Please tell me, is Jiahua Hospital the first hospital I've been admitted to after my accident?" Dr. Lu's expression was still rather relaxed. "No, before Mr. Nian sent you to our hospital, there were records of you being admitted to other hospitals. You can find out about that." So, what the nurse said was true. Ning Qing clenched her fists. Dr. Lu said, "When Mr. Nian sent you here, your condition was very unstable. There was a possibility of brain death at any time. He chose our hospital because of our hard work. Our director made a promise to him and guaranteed the possibility of curing you. After much consideration, he arranged for you to be transferred to another hospital." Ning Qing was shocked. "What do you mean? Did you ask him to transfer me here?" Dr. Lu smiled warmly. "That's right. At that time, our medical group was researching a topic. Your situation was very special and it was almost completely compatible with our treatment plan. It turned out that our treatment was effective. After all, she was sitting here alive and well." Ning Qing was shocked, and her heart fell. This was different from what she had expected. Her lips trembled, and her voice was broken. Then, my parents. Miss Ning, your parents care about you very much." Ning Qing looked at her, her eyes filled with confusion. Dr. Lu sighed and said gently, "When you were first transferred here, your parents felt that the treatment we provided was not safe. Your mother even cried a few times and said that she wanted to transfer you back. It was Mr. Nian who convinced them. It turned out that they cared so much about her, Ing Luo." Ning Qing's throat was dry and bitter, and her heart was twisted. She asked with great difficulty, "There's a medical record for the transfer, right?" "Dr. Lu, the medical records will state the details of the accident, right?" Dr. Lu was helpless and regretful. "Everyone knows about your car accident. When it happened, you weren't sent to our hospital, but we roughly know the situation. I heard that your sister, Wan, stopped breathing before she reached the hospital. You were also rescued after going through a lot of emergency treatment. Then, is the car accident recorded on it an accident? Is there anything suspicious?" Her excitement made Dr. Lu understand something. "Miss Ning, if you're really suspecting something, you should ask the police officer in charge of the case." Ning Qing blurted out, "With Nian Lai around, they won't tell me the truth." Dr. Lu looked at her with a strange expression. His tone was already disapproving. "Do you think Mr. Nian was the one who caused the car accident?" Chapter 53. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Mr. Nian really loves you. 1, Translator. 549690339. Ning Qing's lips quivered, and she only managed to squeeze out 2 words after a long time. "Ing Luo didn't." Dr. Lu frowned and looked at her. "It's not appropriate for you to doubt your husband like this. I think Mr. Nian really loves you. Hearing this, Ning Qing's fingers tightened, and her fingertips dug into her flesh. Love. She was afraid that the person he loved was the other person under her face. Dr. Liu had no idea what she was thinking. He continued, during the 2 years you were in the hospital, he came to see you almost every day and talk to you. Your parents didn't treat him well at first. All the nurses in our hospital know that. At that time, your parents were guarding you all day long. Mr. Nian stood outside the door and couldn't even enter. He could only come in to take a look at you after they left. In today's world, for a man who was already standing at the peak, such devoted love could be said to be something that could only be encountered but not sought. At this moment, the woman seemed to be trying to persuade him. Mr. Nian is very concerned about you, just like yesterday's checkup. I know you didn't want to come, but he is very concerned about your health. In my opinion, he's a typical cold-faced but warm-hearted person. Perhaps his method might not be right, but he must be thinking for you. I've been a doctor for so many years, and I've had many opportunities to treat the rich, but people are equal in the face of life and death. It doesn't matter how much money you have. Similarly, Mr. Nian was born into a wealthy family, but he still treated you as if you were his old friend. This kind of feeling is not something that many people can do. Miss Ning, you should cherish it. Dr. Liu looked at the woman's pale face and did not say anything. The two of them fell silent. After a long time, so long that she thought she would not speak again, Ning Qing finally asked, then, did I fall unconscious because of the car accident? The child in the woman's arms suddenly knocked over the coffee cup. She hurriedly carried the child away, afraid that she would be scalded. The service staff came over to help clean up the mess. Dr. Liu reprimanded the child in a low voice and nodded apologetically to Ning Qing before saying slowly, there is indeed a serious internal injury in your brain. Your nerves are severely damaged, causing you to forget some things. The amount of time you forget varies from person to person. Some people may not forget anything, including the moment when something happened to them. Some people may forget for a year or two, or even longer. The time is uncertain. Ning Qing felt as if someone had grabbed her by the neck and she could no longer speak. From the beginning to the end, Nian Lai had really been helping her. Her chest was filled with a heavy and sorrowful atmosphere, almost taking her breath away, making her cry. The woman answered a call. My husband asked me to go home. Miss Ning, is there anything else you want to ask? She asked. Ning Qing was stunned and shook her head. Then I'll take my leave first. Dr. Liu picked up the child and took 2 steps. He turned back and said to her, go home early. Be careful on the road. Ning Qing's eyes did not move. Thank you. A few minutes after the woman left, she dragged her exhausted body away. After returning to Yunhuang No. 1, Ning Qing did not have any desire to cook or eat. She went upstairs, lay on the bed, and wrapped herself up tightly. Her eyelids were half closed, and her eyelashes cast a shadow on her eyelids. Traces of self-mockery and sadness poured out. The only reason she could survive was really because of him, Hanin. No matter what the reason was, Nian Lai had saved her life in the end. And what had she been doing since she woke up? Chapter 54. You are listening at novelfull.audio. It's honey, but also arsenic_1 translator. 549690339. What was she going to do in the future? How should she face him? Could it be that she really had to fulfill his wishes and be willing to be her sister's substitute? Ning Qing's heart ached, and countless questions rushed to her mind. She was drowning in the deep sea, struggling in anger, but unable to escape the predicament. Tears still came out of her eyes and wet her face. The night was as dark as ink. When Nian Lai returned to Yunyan No. 1, he didn't see the person he wanted to see in the living room. He furrowed his straight brows. Where is she? Lu Kaoshan stepped forward. There was a hint of worry in his voice. Madam came back very early, but she has been in the bedroom since she came back. I don't think Qianqian has come out. Nian Lai's sharp gaze shot over. Why did you only tell me now? Lu Jue felt a little wronged. I only found out about it this afternoon. Moreover, you were with Miss Bai at that time. Wan. Before he could finish his sentence, the person in front of him had already strode across the living room and went up the stairs. Lu Jue had no choice but to follow. Nian Lai quickened his pace and pushed open the door to the master bedroom without hesitation. It was pitch black inside, without a trace of light. Ning Qing, he squinted and called out. No one answered. Lu Jue entered from behind him and turned on the lights. The cold white light shone on every corner of the room, and it was slightly blinding. Nian Lai took a while to get used to it. He saw the unconscious woman on the bed and his pupils shrank. Young madam. The two of them rushed to the bed. Nian Lai's eyelids twitched violently when he saw her flushed face and her forehead covered in sweat. He reached out his hand to feel the temperature of her forehead. It was shockingly hot. He patted her face and called out again, Ning Qing. The woman's thin eyebrows were tightly furrowed, and she seemed uneasy. Lu Jue, get the car ready. Nian Yu ordered through gritted teeth. Lu Jue hurriedly nodded and rushed out of the door. When they were alone, the room was so quiet that only her heavy breathing and her sleep talking could be heard. Nian Lai's expression changed drastically, and the panic and heartache in his heart were especially obvious. He bent down, lifted her blanket, and took her into his arms. His body temperature was so hot that he was shocked. Sister, 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 sister. The woman murmured softly with a faint sobbing tone, making one's heart ache. Nian Lai's arms tightened around her. He bent his ear and moved closer to her lips. Sister, I'm sorry. It's my fault. Don't go. I'm begging you. Don't leave me alone, I'm begging you. Sister, I don't want anything anymore. Please come back, I can't take it anymore. Sister, please. I have nothing. No one loves me, Ing Luo. No one loves me anymore. Tears flowed down from her red eyes. She waved her hands wildly, as if she was trying to grab onto something. Her voice was hoarse, and it was clear that she had been crying for a long time. The pain was heartbreaking. Nian Lai's body stiffened, and his long and thick eyelashes drooped, hiding the guilt and heartache that was growing wildly in his eyes. He held her hand tightly to prevent himself from falling into the memories of love and hate, but he didn't expect that he couldn't stop himself. To him, the past was like honey and also like arsenic. As for him, every time, it was like drinking poison to quench his thirst, he was happy to do it. His face was full of affection, and he looked at Ning Qing with infatuation and affection, as if he could not tell dream from reality. He shouted in an extremely low voice, Ah Ning. His eyes reddened, and his trembling hand touched her face, gently wiping the tears that flowed down her cheeks with his thumb. Inch by inch, it was extremely detailed. He asked carefully and humbly, Can you come back? The only response he got was a dead silence. Chapter 55. You are listening at novelfull.audio. She still thinks that you have something to do with her sister's death. 1. Translator 549690339. After a long time, Nian Lai calmed down and regained his usual indifference and calmness. He picked up the thin and weak Ning Qing, took a coat from the closet, and put it on her before he left. Lu Jue was already waiting in the courtyard downstairs. He carried her into the car and headed to the hospital. When Nian Lai arrived at the hospital, the director and the others were already waiting for him. Her fever is very serious, Nian Lai said, and the group of people hurriedly sent Ning Qing to the intensive care unit. After the diagnosis, the doctor said that she had suffered a huge external shock and was overly depressed, causing her body to be unable to take it, which led to the high fever. After a few tries, the 4-drip was ready, and the woman lay on the bed obediently, no longer talking in her sleep. Nian Lai stood at the door with Dr. Lu in front of him. He looked at her coldly, without any emotion. "What did you say to her?" "Young master," Dr. Lu said nervously, "I really didn't say much to madam today. Mr. Lu was the one who communicated with me in advance. I was just following his instructions." Nian Lai's expression was ice-cold, and his tone was already unfriendly. "If it wasn't you, why did she become like this? She had a high fever, her whole body was soaked, and she was still so sad." Dr. Lu waved his hands in denial. "The two nurses were too talkative. I've already covered it up. When I left, madam didn't look too sad. It can't be that she still thinks that you have something to do with her sister's death, Jinjin." The cold gaze fell on Dr. Lu's face. He was so scared that he shivered and his voice quickly became quiet. The man in front of her was only in his 20s, but she was very afraid of the aura of a high-ranking person on him, as if he could decide her life and death at any time. Nian Lai had lost his patience with her. Just as he was about to say something, a sound came from the ward. "From now on, I don't want to hear anything about Ning Su from your mouth in front of her and me," he said to Dr. Lu sternly. Dr. Lu trembled in fear. "Yes." Nian Lai turned around, pushed the door open, and entered. On the bed, the woman did not move at all. He looked at the curtains that had been blown open by the wind, walked over, and closed the window. The pale ward was quiet. Nian Lai walked to her window, his dark eyes falling on her pale little face. The woman no longer had her usual liveliness, and she no longer talked back to him. Her delicate and beautiful facial features were tinged with sadness, and her originally red lips had lost their color. The pair of eyes that would glare at him angrily and express dissatisfaction was also tightly shut at this moment. The Ning Qing now seemed to have returned to the 2 years she had been lying in bed. The hand that wanted to touch her stopped in the air for a few seconds before it retracted. Nian Lai pulled over a chair and sat down beside her bed. As he stared at her sleeping face, the frustration in his heart surged out with pain that could not be ignored. He took out a cigarette from his pocket, but he did not light it because he was worried about her. The next morning, Ning Qing struggled to wake up from her sleep and stared at the ceiling above her. "Mrs. Nian, you're finally awake." The nurse exclaimed in joy when she saw that Nian Xiaomu was awake. "What's wrong with me?" Ning Qing was stunned. She tilted her head and looked at her. "What did I do? Last night, your fever was almost 40 degrees, and it scared our doctors." Fever. 40 degrees. She couldn't remember. Yesterday, she had cried and used up all her strength, so she fell asleep in bed in a daze. In her half-awake state, she only felt that she was very hot and seemed to be very bumpy. It also felt as if someone had been whispering in her ear for a long time. Ning Qing lowered her eyes and looked at her hands. "Who sent me here last night?" she asked the nurse. Chapter 56. You are listening at novelfull.audio. This is what you told me, he has something on. Translator 549690339. Her voice was still hoarse from the fever, and it sounded weak and worn out. "It's a man with the surname Lu," the nurse said with a smile. It was Lu Jue. Ning Qing couldn't explain the emotion in her heart. Her eyes looked down and fell on the white quilt. Lu Jue had just returned with breakfast. "Young madam, you're awake." Ning Qing nodded at him, her eyes moving back a little before she looked away. The nurse placed the small table on the bed. Lu Jue took out the breakfast and opened the lids one by one. There was lean meat porridge with vegetables, crystal dumplings, and soup dumplings. It was not a lot, but it looked very delicious. Please eat something to fill your stomach first. I'll call the doctor over. All right, he said. Lu Jue left the ward, leaving the nurse and her behind. Ning Qin picked up her chopsticks and glanced at the nurse. She could not help but ask, did anyone else come last night? Who are you talking about? The nurse shook her head and asked in confusion. Ning Qin's melancholic gaze moved down, and her tone was very light. It's nothing, perhaps it was her illusion. After Ning Qin had eaten something, Lu Jue came back with the doctor. After a round of examination, the doctor said that her fever had completely subsided. He gave her some medicine and told her not to catch a cold and so on before leaving. Can I be discharged? Ning Qin asked. Of course you can. Outside the door, Nian Sun stood there silently. Lu Jue came out and gently closed the door. Madam said she wants to be discharged. Nian Lai's expression was indifferent, and no emotions could be seen. Do as she says, he said. With that, he turned to leave. Young master, Lu Jue couldn't help but remind him, are you really not going to go in and see young madam? The man's back was tall and straight. Just by standing there, he exuded an aura of authority. Lu Jue said, you've been watching over her the entire night. You left before she woke up. How would madam know your feelings? And when I went in just now, madam looked very disappointed. She must have hoped that the person who went in was you. The man didn't look back, his calm words were cold. Lu Jue, you're talking too much. Lu Jue lowered his head. Sorry, young master. Nian Lai didn't say much. He glanced at the door and said, send her back safely. Then, he strode away. Lu Jue helped Ning Qin change into the clean clothes that Nian Lai had sent over. After she finished packing, the two of them returned to Yunhuang No. 1. After Ning Qin went back, she slept all the way until dark. That night, Lu Jue brought her some food. They were all light and suitable for her, but she didn't show any emotions. After dinner, Ning Qin sat on the sofa in the living room. He looked like he was watching a TV show, but in fact, he was waiting for someone. Lu Jue picked up the call and hesitated about whether he should say it. What's the matter? Ning Qin took the initiative to ask when she saw him. Young master called to say that Ing Luo has something on tonight and won't be coming back. He asked you to rest early. Under Ning Qin's calm and clear gaze, Lu Jue bit the bullet and said this. I see. Ning Qin said in a low voice, and then her lips twitched. I know. She turned off the TV and got up to go upstairs. The phone in her hand suddenly vibrated. Ning Qin paused, her eyes closed. A photo came into view. Under the dim light, the woman sat on the man's body and wrapped her arms around his neck. The two of them were kissing and their posture was extremely ambiguous. BDNV, a sneer came out of her mouth, mixed with sarcasm and mockery. She called out to Lu Jue, who was about to leave, and slowly walked in front of him. He raised his phone. Assistant Lu, is this the person you told me about? Is he busy? Chapter 57. You are listening at novelfull.audio. To be more direct, you divorce and marry me. 1. Translator. 549690339. Lu Jue panicked when he saw Bai Qingqing and Nian Lai on the screen. Young madam, it's not what you're thinking. Ning Qin's tone was calm, but there was a sense of oppression in her voice. Seeing is believing. You can't tell me that my eyes are deceiving me. Lu Jue's face turned pale. Ning Qin looked at him and instantly knew that the situation in the photo was most likely true. The curve of her lips deepened, and her pale face was so sharp that it made people frightened. Do you know where he is now? Take me to him. In the private room of the bar. The lights flickered, and the colorful wines on the table reflected all kinds of lights. In every dark corner, indescribable things seemed to be happening. Bai Qingqing straddled Nian Lai, her eyes charming as she tried her best to seduce the man beneath her. Mr. Nian, why haven't you come to see me these days? Did Qianqian do something wrong and make you unhappy? Nian Lai held the wine glass in one hand and rested his other hand naturally on the sofa. He didn't refuse or cater to her. His tone was very light. No. Bai Qingqing's eyes darted around, and her red lips moved closer to his chin. Then why didn't you come to see me? If you do this, I'll think that you don't want me anymore. Nian Lai tilted his head and took a sip of wine. He lowered his eyes, which were filled with faint emotions, and the words he spat out were wrapped in the fragrance of wine. I'm busy. Bai Qingqing wasn't discouraged by his reticence. She bit her lip, her face full of grievance. Since you're busy, how can you have time to go home? You have time to go home and visit your unromantic wife. Why don't you come and visit me? In the darkness, a trace of coldness flashed across Nian Lai's face, but it disappeared very quickly. The woman's soft hands climbed onto his chest, and her tone was between coquettish and complaining. What's so good about her? Didn't you say that you don't like her? But you've been going back every day and not accompanying me. It's making me feel that I'm not as good as her in your heart. Oh. His deep and magnetic voice made Bai Qingqing lose her senses. Nian Ju tilted his head back slightly and narrowed his eyes. I didn't know you had so little confidence in yourself. The smile on Bai Qingqing's lips froze, then turned into an even more gorgeous smile. Of course I'm confident when facing others, but I'm not confident when it comes to you. Nian Lai's cold eyes flickered. This means that you lack experience. Bai Qingqing's hands undid the buttons on his chest, slowly rubbing against each other. I can't read your mind. Who knows if you really like me? Nian Jing allowed her to do as she pleased and looked at her with a clear gaze. What does it mean to like? The woman thought for a moment, then pouted and chuckled. In Luo, for example, you can announce my identity, confess to me, do what I like with me, or, more directly, you can divorce and marry me. Zhenzhen. His gentle call made the woman's entire body go soft, and she almost lay in his arms. What's wrong? She asked shyly, her eyes watery. Aren't you afraid that you'll want too much? Bai Qingqing gave a half-dot smile. How can I be worthy of you if I don't have many? Besides, I can give you what I want. She was confident that even though the man in front of her had never said that he loved her, he did not stop the rumors that were flying around. This had never happened before. He silently agreed that she had made their relationship known to everyone, including his wife, which meant that he had her in his heart. Therefore, she only needed to work hard and she would definitely get what she wanted. Bai Qingqing smiled very gently, thinking that she would succeed this time. In the end, the moment her hand was about to reach into his collar, she was suddenly caught. Because he wanted to be worthy of me, he asked around for my schedule. Chapter 58. You are listening at novelfull.audio. You should know that I don't like to be controlled by others. Translator 549690339. Nian Lai grabbed her wrist, the cold light in his eyes exploding. Bai Qingqing, you're quite capable now. Fear and guilt came suddenly, and the woman's expression froze. Nian Lai gently swirled the wine glass in his hand. The light reflected from the wine glass was suppressed and mysterious. You should know that I don't like to be controlled by others, he said. Bai Qingqing's face instantly turned pale. Nian Lai pushed her away and stood up. Bai Qingqing tugged at the corner of his shirt, her eyes hazy with tears. Young man, I just want to know what you've been doing all this while. Because I missed you too much, and you didn't come to see me either. I had no choice but to do this. Don't be angry with me. The light in Nian Lai's eyes was unfathomable. He raised his head and finished the red wine in one gulp. He held her hand, his actions gentle and distant as usual. Don't think too much about it. Just join the crew and film the day after tomorrow. Tears welled up in Bai Qingqing's eyes as she muttered his name. Young man, don't go, Ing Luo. The man's face did not change, and he ruthlessly removed her hand. He reached out his long arm and picked up the coat on the sofa. Under everyone's surprise, he left without any reluctance. When the people outside saw him coming out, they all went up to him and asked about him. They were afraid that something had gone wrong. Nian Lai only said one sentence. In the future, don't bring anyone here. He walked out smoothly and stood at the exit of the bar with bright lights. Nian Lai took 2 steps out of the room and called Lu Jue. Come and pick me up. Lu Jue stammered. Young master, our taxi has arrived. It's at the door. Nian Lai had his coat hanging on his arm. Hearing that, he looked at the car parked by the side of the road. The streamlined body of the car was sharp and eye-catching in the night. The windows were dark, and the people inside were unknown. He took a step forward. Behind him, a woman's voice stopped him. Young man, don't go yet. Wait for me. Bai Qingqing wasn't willing to give up. She chased after him, spread her arms, and stood in front of Nian Lai. Are you angry with me? Ing Luo knows that she's in the wrong. You don't like it, so I won't do this kind of thing again. Don't send me into the crew to film, I don't want to leave you. The woman's weak cry was especially clear on this quiet roadside. Nian Jin pursed his thin lips tightly, his deep gaze landing on Bai Qingqing. The woman stepped forward and held his hand. She anxiously pleaded for mercy. I was really wrong. Young master, please don't send me away. I'll be sad. Her face had an indescribable charm under the shadow of the light. Fragile and flirtatious, under the gaze of her eyes, Nian Yun was dazed for a moment. After that, his heart was in turmoil. When he looked over the woman's shoulder and into the car, he finally fell silent. Ing Luo, don't mess around, he said. Bai Qingqing thought that he had relented. Regardless of his wishes, she went up to him and put her arms around his waist. Nian Junting, I know you think I'm the same as those women in the industry, but I want to tell you that I'm different from them because I really love you. She was originally an ordinary 7th or 8th tier female model, and it was by chance that they met. She had fallen in love with such a handsome and overbearing man at first sight. Fortunately, he also remembered her. When she took the initiative to ask for a role, he agreed without hesitation. After that, countless resources poured into her. He had helped her get to the top and given her resources. He was usually such a busy person, but he would personally send her to the production team, pick her up from work, buy her the luxury goods that countless women were after, and treat her gently. If this wasn't love, then what was it? Bai Qingqing firmly believed that the only obstacle between her and Nian Lai was his wife, who had almost never appeared in public. Therefore, she had to help him take that step. She looked up, tears streaming down her face. Don't push me away, Nian Lai. I really love you. You love me too, don't you? Chapter 59. You are listening at novelfull.audio. It's all because of you, because I love you. Translator 549690339. The woman's confession was met with a long silence from the man. The atmosphere in the car was as cold as ice. Ning Qing's face was expressionless as she listened to another woman express her feelings to her husband. Even she found it ridiculous. At this moment, her heart was terrifyingly calm. Go and ask him if he's leaving, she said to the person in front of her in an obscure manner. Yes, Lu Jue replied awkwardly. He pushed the car door open and got out of the car. He walked up to Nian Lai. Young master, the young madam asked if you're going back. He asked. Not daring to look up at the two of them. Bai Qingqing, who was leaning against Nian Lai's chest, widened her eyes. She came so quickly. But on second thought, she felt that it was good that she was here. She would let her see who was more important to Nian Lai, her wife or Bai Qingqing. Above, the man did not speak. Lu Jui nodded and returned to the car. Young madam, Jinjin. Ning Qing closed her eyes and said, "Let's go." The car started and slowly drove away. After they left, the cold air from Nian Lai's body swept over. He looked down at the top of the woman's head and said coldly, "Bai Qingqing, let go." NBSP, the woman froze and slowly let go of his waist. She looked up and saw the man's cold face. She trembled. Young man. The look in Nian Qi's eyes as he looked at her changed 1,000 times. For a moment, she almost thought that he was going to strangle her to death. The next second, his expression had already calmed down, and he looked no different from usual. "Ing Luo, I don't like you being like this," he said. There were still tears on Bai Qingqing's face, making her look very pitiful and heart-wrenching. He took out a handkerchief from his pocket and gently wiped her tears. "You used to be a confident and bright girl who would perform in front of me just to get a role. How did you become like this?" Bai Qingqing bit her red lips. "Isn't it all because of you? Because I love you." The man's palm was on the side of her face through the handkerchief. "I'm not treating you well now." "Alright, but Ing Luo." "No buts." Nian Lai cut her off. His hands were hanging by his side, and his face was expressionless. "I like you to be obedient. Being unreasonable will only make people hate you." The woman felt even more aggrieved. Nian Qi sighed, his expression softening. "I've already gotten you the role you wanted. Go to work the day after tomorrow and don't throw a tantrum, okay?" Bai Qingqing knew that this was already the best he could do for her. No matter how unwilling she was, she could only nod. "I know. I'll get your manager to pick you up." 10 minutes later, the woman finally left. Nian Qi stared at the back of the car until it disappeared. He stood in the cool wind and threw his hand. The handkerchief chased after the wind and fell to the ground, unable to stir up any waves. When Nian Lai returned to Yunyan No. 1, the lights in the master bedroom had already been turned off. He walked closer to the bed. The woman was curled up on the bed with her back facing him. He knelt on the bed with one knee and reached out to turn her body. Ning Qing's eyes were wide open, but she did not feel sleepy at all. "Waiting for me." Nian Lai's voice was a little hoarse. "Go take a shower." His body suddenly stiffened. "If you have anything to say, say it after you're done showering." Her calmness made him feel as if there was a fishbone stuck in his throat. He got out of bed and went to the bathroom. Ning Qing heard the sound of water and clutched the blanket in front of her chest tighter and tighter. When Nian Lai came out of the shower, Ning Qing was already sitting on the sofa waiting for him. There was an empty glass of red wine next to her hand. "What are you drinking for?" The man, who was still wet, walked to her side and asked in a low voice. From his point of view, Nian Lai saw Ning Qing smile. It was very faint, almost invisible. "I just want to try something that so many people like." Nian Yu's eyes darkened. "And the result?" "Very ordinary. But I can't deny that so many people like it." There was a hidden meaning in her words, and Nian Jin was speechless. The next second, her calm voice was heard. "You're getting along well with her." Chapter 60. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Between her and Bai Qingqing, he could only choose 1_1 translator. 549690339. Ning Qing smiled, the corners of her eyes looking up. "Nian Lai, when do you plan to get a divorce and give her a proper status?" Nian Lai's expression darkened. Ning Qing stood up, but even when she stood up, she was still far from him. She raised her head. "I watched the drama that she's been broadcasting recently. Her acting skills are not bad, and she's good in all aspects. If nothing goes wrong, she should be able to make a name for herself in the entertainment industry." However, if we wait until then and someone reveals that she's the third party, it will have a huge impact on her. You probably can't bear to let her suffer such grievances. She sounded very sincere, as if she was really considering his and Bai Qingqing's future. Nian Lai was wearing a bathrobe. His short hair was still wet and hadn't been dried yet. At this moment, as he listened to her words, he could only feel the coldness in the warm room. What are you trying to say? Ning Qing looked at him. She was neither angry nor resentful about him letting her come home alone tonight. She shook her head. I just wanted to ask you. Have you considered it? Ning Qing's eyes were clear and bright, so clean that they reflected the gentle light in the room, as if she was also very warm. He almost didn't dare to look at it directly. I know I don't have the right to ask for a divorce. I'm just reminding you. You can ignore me and accept our current marriage, but not your little lover. If it's really as she said, that she loves you, then she can't accept my existence. Nian Lai, do you understand? Nian Lai clenched his jaw and stared at her with his deep eyes. She wasn't angry, she wasn't jealous, she didn't care, it was only because she didn't love him. Even though he had another woman, she was not sad at all and even helped them plan their future. A cold smile emerged from his thin lips, and his expression was gloomy. You're still as generous as ever. I'm telling you that there are some things that you can't have both sides. Ning Qing felt a stab in her heart. But her face remained calm. Between her and Bai Qingqing, he could only choose one. Ning Qing. He took her hand and pulled her into his arms. I want to be with another woman, do you really not mind? Ning Qing's face was pale, and her red lips trembled. Do you care what I think? She asked with bitter smile. She looked into his angry eyes, and the tipsy feeling of alcohol rose. The suppressed rationality and silence gradually collapsed. If you really cared, you wouldn't be with another woman. But the truth is, you've already done that, haven't you? Tears welled up in her eyes, and Ning Qing's expression became fragile. Nian Lai noticed the change in her. He was stunned for a few seconds before he suddenly thought of something. You're not happy? He asked hesitantly. Some kind of emotion had accumulated in his chest and was on the verge of exploding, but he had to suppress it so that it would not show. He lowered his head and asked softly, as if he was afraid that he would scare her if he raised his voice. Tell me, are you not thinking highly of Bai Qingqing when I'm with her? Yes. The woman suddenly screamed, and he suddenly stopped. After shouting, Ning Qing immediately flung his hand away. She felt aggrieved and sad, and her expression was complicated and frightened. No, why would I care? What am I talking about? Her mind was clearly clear, so how could she say such things in a fit of anger? The man in front of her was the man who loved her sister. She must have been driven crazy. Before Nian Lai could celebrate, he immediately realized that something was wrong with her. Ning Qing. He frowned. She held her head in her hands and mumbled something to herself. Nian Lai stepped forward and grabbed her arm, but she pushed him away. Don't touch me with the hand that you've used to hug others with. It's dirty.